On this edition of Sightings, in 1994, these school children saw a UFO land. 2 years later, the alien visitors keep coming.
Why would 62 children lie?
Now their neighborhood is becoming a UFO hotspot.
Because you got a lot of heat.
Yeah. You feel it now? Yeah?
Oh, strongly.
Then, their hands have caused the lame to walk and the blind to see. Who are these healers among us?
Through negligence, through weakness.
Later, he's a country minister, and he's also England's premier exorcist.
There always have been hauntings down the centuries.
Also, the Air Force uses this machine to train pilots. Those who use it say it creates out-of-body experiences.
Except for reality itself, I don't remember anything being quite that real.
And can anything be done to the perverse spirit that's terrorizing these three women?
Welcome to Sightings. I'm Tim White. After our recent report on a UFO encounter and group contact in Ruwa, Zimbabwe, many Sightings viewers wrote in requesting additional information about this historic incident. And as Carla Wohl tells us in this extended report, the Ruwa encounter was only the first in a series of ongoing UFO sightings. Ruwa, it seems, is Earth's newest paranormal hotspot.
Ruwa is a small agricultural community in Zimbabwe's bush country, now the focus of UFO research, because sightings are definitely on the rise in this part of Africa.
The sightings have increased. It has now come to the stage that I do not think a day goes by without some sighting.
I'd say at least half of the sightings that we have are genuine, and the balance would be attributed to things like meteorites, natural phenomenon, that sort of thing. But at least half the sightings reports that we get are definitely genuine.
This string of UFO activity began with a group encounter that occurred in this field next to the Ariel Primary School in Ruwa. In September of 1994, 62 school children claimed that a UFO had landed and that they saw alien beings emerge from the spacecraft.
All I saw was a silver flash, just like that. And I saw a few I saw the bigger one and a spaceship, like 4 or 5 of them, like crowding around it.
They were very still, and then I saw them also disappear. They went about a meter off the ground and then they just vanished. We ran down to the teachers and we went into the office and we started telling the teachers, and then they said maybe there's nothing.
But the children started drawing pictures, creating in pencil and crayon a disturbing portrait of extraterrestrial contact.
Definitely not a human. He had a big head and big black eyes and was dressed in a black bodysuit. And his eyes were down here and he was like looking really, really funny.
And these eyes, the children tell us, conveyed a telepathic message, a frightening warning about Earth's destruction.
I think they're trying to tell us something which is going to happen, and other people don't actually believe us sometimes. So maybe they are trying to show us something.
I'd like to welcome Cynthia Hind from Africa. Thank you very much.
No one knows the story of the Ruwa group sighting better than researcher Cynthia Hind. At a recent International UFO Congress in England, Hind held ufologists spellbound with the stories of the Ruwa schoolchildren.
I believe them. I believe they saw what they said they saw, small details that I saw in the drawings, which were incredible.
Hind is a respected African journalist who covered the Ruwa encounter for the BBC. What she finds most convincing about the story is the fact that not one of the 62 children has changed his or her version of what happened since the event first occurred in 1994. This despite the community's strict punishment for lying.
Well, I'll tell you one thing. They're afraid of the headmaster. There's no doubt about it at all. He's one of the people that still cane children if they're naughty. Says he believes in discipline. And he said, I'm not a believer, but he said, I can tell you one thing, the children would never lie to me.
But not everyone who studied the Ruwa group sighting believes the children's story.
It's not a question of whether they're lying or not, okay? It's a question of their distinction between reality and not reality may not be as sharp as that of an older kid or an adult person.
Professor John Saliba teaches comparative religion and has researched many claims of extraterrestrial contact, discounting them all.
Another thing which kind of struck me is, here are these craft coming down, presumably making lots of noise, and none of the adults ventured out to see why there's such a noise taking place.
We were all actually in the middle of a staff meeting in the staff room, so there was no teacher actually outside at that point in time.
You must have been discussing some very important topics at the meeting there you were having. So that's kind of a thing which struck me.
I still don't understand how you could get 62 kids to come up with the exact same story.
I think kids knew about flying saucers. The way they drew the flying saucer and the so-called people who came out of it. Now, those are pictures you'll find in TV programs, in movies.
Well, a lot of these children don't go to the movies. They live in the country. Parents are farmers.
I believe them because normally children don't lie about things like that. And we always joke with the children, we always say, all these little green men come out. And they say, no, Mommy, but we did see.
But I am sure that they personally are convinced that they saw something and it was something not part of nature.
Well, I mean, kind of, I'm one of those people who like to see with my own eyes, okay?
So essentially, there's nothing that you could hear from the children that would convince you.
I mean, I have to admit, you have all these stories of flying saucers for the last 40 years, and I can't understand their goals while they're here. I don't know what they're doing. They're wasting their time. They're going around in circles, talking to a few people who are insignificant.
But Hine does not view the children or the events that they claim to have witnessed as insignificant. Her proof is a question that haunts everyone who has investigated the Ruwa sightings.
Why would 62 children lie?
And because there have been hundreds of additional sightings since then throughout South Central Africa, more people are trusting in the children.
But the children can't lie. They tell the truth.
PEER, the Program for Extraordinary Experience Research, an organization founded by Dr. John Mack, is continuing to work in Southern Africa. Currently, PEER is producing an in-depth documentary on the Ruwa sightings.
Next, the mystery of healing hands. Later,
when it looked like it split apart, it actually went up an hour.
Strange phenomena in the skies above Idaho.
Psychic healing has a bad name in this country. Most people associating it with psychic surgery, the carnival sideshow version of holistic medicine. But at a recent medical conference sponsored by Harvard University, some forms of psychic healing were praised by mainstream medical practitioners, validating the belief that the mind-body connection plays an essential role in curing illness.
I think it's any question that some people seem to have a natural talent or ability to heal others.
Dr. C. Norman Shealy is a Harvard-trained physician and medical researcher who has spent the last 25 years investigating the claims of alternative healers. He is now among a growing number of medical professionals who recognize the value that so-called spiritual healers can have in modern healthcare.
The definition of a healer is really difficult to come by. And most healers will tell you that they don't heal. They are channels for healing energy, which all of the ones I've talked to believe is the power of God or divine power coming through them in order to assist people in healing.
I start by, of course, asking for the help from Spirit, because I believe it all comes from the God force, and that we open up to it and let that energy flow, and that whatever the problem is, that it's just taken care of.
Douglas Johnson is a spiritual healer who has a sterling reputation among physicians and his clients, who include a number of Hollywood celebrities. He has an astonishing and well-documented healing track record.
I had a cyst. They were going to operate, and I told the doctor I'd be back, and the doctor was screaming that can turn, and you can have peritonitis, and I went to Doug for 2 treatments. I went back, there was no cyst.
I don't even know what it is, but I've seen cancerous tumors instantly disappear. I've seen blind people practically instantly see.
Before I went to Douglas Johnson, I couldn't see from here to where your cars are down here. And that's about 25 feet. But now, after Douglas Johnson and the healing, I can see all those buildings all the way back.
Josephine Hauk was diagnosed with irreversible glaucoma by a world-renowned ophthalmologist. But after a single healing session with Douglas Johnson, her vision was restored and her daily headaches disappeared.
I says, later on, I says, Doctor, do I have glaucoma? He says, no. I said, Doctor, why? The first time I came here, I says, you told me it was glaucoma. And he says, I don't know what happened. And he checked me out because he didn't believe in it. See, he couldn't find nothing. God, you got a lot of heat.
Yeah. You feel it now?
Oh, strongly.
Johnson believes that healing energy flows through him and into his clients, who report a distinct sensation of heat emanating from his hands. And when a sightings investigative team trained a thermal-sensitive camera on the healer, his fingertip, shown here in red, hit the top of the temperature scale.
It's like when you're on a hot day, you see like waves coming up off the pavement. Well, that's what I feel is coming out of my hand.
6,000 miles away, another spiritual healer with an international reputation channels what he calls the source, divine healing energy that also flows through his hands. Jeff Boltwood of Glastonbury, England, claims that this energy sometimes materializes in the form of ash, minerals, or oil, a phenomenon that sightings captured in this unedited videotape.
All of a sudden, from nowhere, from Jeff's stroking of my hand, was divine oil coming through. And the smell was amazing. The smell filled the room just from Jeff manifesting his oil on my hand.
2 years ago, Colin Hydes was working under his car when the jack slipped and the car crushed his skull. He suffered a massive brain hemorrhage and was in a coma for more than 2 weeks. After he regained consciousness, he was partially paralyzed with blurred vision, slurred speech, and vital CSF, cerebral fluid, was leaking out of his brain. As a last resort, Colin's wife Jenny brought him to Jeff Boltwood.
Within 2 weeks of seeing Jeff, I had no CSF leak. I had no CSF leak. It was completely clear. And I was, wow, something had happened. Something had happened.
Within a month, Colin's other disabilities began to disappear. His vision returned, and he was able to take off his neck brace.
I noticed that he became very much more upright, and he was very much more fortified with life.
The question of why I have certain gifts, it comes up a great deal. Philosophically, I often say to people, there's no such thing as why. I don't ever question it in that way. I do it because that's what I'm here to do.
Just as there are very few Mozarts in the world, there are very few really genius healers, if you will. And I don't think anyone can define why a given person happens to be that kind of healer.
And yet, the few healers who have gained the respect of traditional health professionals like Johnson and Boltwood do share some unusual personal characteristics. Dr. Anthony Schofield of London University has made a comparative study of healers past and present.
Many healers seem to have had some serious illness in the past. And it seems to me as if they've loosened their ties with this material world and seem to have sort of 1 foot in this world and 1 foot in the other world. And it's this wounded healer phenomenon that seems to allow them to channel these healing energies.
Well, first of all, I had to fight to survive. Both my mother and I almost died when I was born, and she had a very serious heart condition.
Douglas Johnson inherited his mother's condition, and as a young boy had several brushes with death before, he claims, a spirit visited him and bestowed the gift of healing. Boltwood, too, had a near-death experience at age 5 after a serious bout with rheumatic fever.
A wonderful light came around the bed, and it got very intense, and a voice said that I would have to go back because I had work to do. And then the light entered me, with a rush of energy, and then I woke up in the bed, feeling very well. I later discovered that my heart had stopped for a short while.
Dr. Schofield has found that many healers believe their power comes from their ability to transcend the physical and absorb the spiritual. And in an attempt to provide a more scientific basis for this mystical theory, Dr. Schofield is performing experiments with Jeff Boltwood. In one, damaged plant seeds treated by Boltwood improved significantly over an untreated control group.
And an increasing number of scientists believe that healing is a result of tapping into some universal subconscious and harnessing healing energies in this way. Ultimately, I don't suppose we'll know this side of the grave, quite frankly, what the true answer is. But all we do know is that healing works.
Although there are signs alternative healing will have a permanent place in many hospitals and clinics, the field is rife with fraud and disreputable people looking for a fast buck from a vulnerable patient. Use your common sense and never undertake any alternative therapies without first checking with your doctor.
Next, documented sightings and official denials in Idaho. Looking for microscopic life in space. And a monk is reborn in Seattle.
Here are some of the stories Sightings is following in the news. UFO sightings concentrated along the Idaho-Oregon border continue to make headlines. And the area where they are being sighted is widening, with the appearance of a new flap observed by multiple eyewitnesses over Idaho's state capital. In Fairfield, Idaho, a small town just 80 miles east of Boise, ufologists are investigating the appearance of a brilliant orb and its link to similar sightings in the northwestern United States.
I saw a tremendous flash of light. It was preceded by what I thought was the loudest sonic boom I'd ever heard.
Johnson immediately called the two closest Air Force bases and received contradictory information.
It made me wonder if they hadn't been tracking whatever this thing was, and if this thing was actually a UFO, they may have been scoping out Fairfield for whatever reason.
There's been a lot of strange things come out of those hills. People that live in the area have been talking about it for years.
I was coming up from the barn about 6:40 in the morning from feeding my horses when I spotted a brilliant white light in the south.
There wasn't no sparks off of it or tails. It was just a big, bright light, and it was bigger than a plane, and it was traveling much faster.
The last impression I had of it, when it looked like it split apart, was it actually went up and out. I mean, it didn't go out of sight as far as my view goes. It just stopped being there.
The earth-shaking UFO actually triggered the seismograph at Boise State University.
We personally feel like this was something that was extraterrestrial. What the answer is, we hope that we will find that.
But that answer is not forthcoming, and local residents are growing increasingly frustrated with official lack of interest.
We are the taxpayers. They are our people, and yet they have the nerve, the audacity to stand and lie to us about, tell us we're crazy. They owe us truth, don't they?
At Cape Canaveral, NASA has announced plans to gather comet dust for analysis back on Earth. But what they'll find inside that cosmic exhaust is anybody's guess. In 2003, an unmanned probe called Stardust will intercept the comet Wild 2 during its orbit around the sun. As the comet flies past, Stardust will deploy a grid to catch samples from the comet's tail, dust as old as the universe that may contain extraterrestrial organisms. The astronauts of Apollo 11 gathered our first and only space dust, and NASA acknowledged the possibility that they had brought back alien life forms by quarantining the astronauts. This time, Stardust will jettison its canister of samples into the Utah desert. It will then be transported to a secret military weapons base, identified only as the Utah Test and Training Range. Some maverick scientists believe that within the dust they may find complex organic molecules, or even germs or spores, that will prove their theory that the universe is alive. In Seattle, Washington, An American Buddhist congregation has recognized one of its own as the reincarnation of a long-dead Tibetan Lama. 4-year-old Sunab Wongdu was chosen as the Lama's Tukala, or reincarnation, even before his birth, according to his mother.
There's hundreds of reincarnated Tukalas, you know, all through, you know, Tibet, India, Nepal, Bhutan, and stuff. This happens sort of like all the time. It's just he's different because he's, you know, this is happening in America.
Reincarnation is a central precept of Tibetan Buddhism. In this faith, lamas, or holy men, are reborn again and again. When a child is advanced as a reincarnated lama, secret rituals and tests are performed to determine if the child really is the old lama in a new body. Recently, these tests were performed in Seattle, and as a result, this child is now accepted by Tibetan Buddhists worldwide as the reborn Lama Daeshung Rinpoche, who died in 1987, a man who foretold his own rebirth.
He lived in Seattle all together about 20 years, and he even told two of his very faithful students. One is American and one is a Tibetan man. And he told him he's going to be born in Seattle.
Strangely, the 1993 film Little Buddha also foretold the Lama's rebirth in Seattle in much the same way. In real life, the new Tukala will now claim his place as a holy man. He'll be given up voluntarily by his mother to be raised in a Kathmandu monastery.
Of course, you know, to have that kind of education is just what an incredible, incredible opportunity. You know, so I'm very happy about that. But of course, I'm going to be extremely sad and, you know, probably cry oceans, you know.
In January, the littlest Lama left the United States for his new life in Kathmandu. When he's a teenager, Sunab will return to his congregation in Seattle, living proof to his followers of the eternal circle of life. We'll have more stories from the news next time. Now, here's what's coming up on Sightings.
By day, this vicar tends to the spiritual needs of his parish. At night, he exorcises their spirits.
One of the women came to me and said, look, can you tell me, am I heading for a nervous breakdown or is my house haunted? And I had my first case.
For 30 years, Reverend Tom Willis has been the vicar of Holy Trinity Church in the tiny seaside town of Bridlington, England. He performs Mass, baptisms, and exorcisms. In fact, Reverend Willis has gained a national reputation as the man to call when someone or something is haunting your house, your business, or even your soul.
Almighty God, our Heavenly Father, we have sinned against you and against our fellow men.
Even before I became a priest, I was interested and fascinated by the whole problem of whether ghosts existed or not. And I used to collect newspaper cuttings and talk to people who claimed to see ghosts. And it was just a hobby examining the evidence for and against ghosts. Then one day, after I was fairly newly ordained, I was asked to give a talk on this subject. And one of the women afterwards, who had been listening to the talk, came to me and said, look, can you tell me, am I heading for a nervous breakdown or is my house haunted? And I had my first case.
The vicar determined that it was not a nervous breakdown, but a tragic suicide in the home years before that was somehow creating the haunting activity. His successful exorcism of that home and the relief he brought to its owner 35 years ago set Reverend Tom Willis on a unique career path. He estimates that since 1962, he has taken on more than 500 haunting cases.
Usually what happens, the telephone rings and somebody rather diffidently says, are you the vicar that deals with this sort of, with hauntings? And I say yes, and they say, well, we think we've got something in our house or in our office or in our factory, and I wonder if you could come and investigate. We've been called to trawlers and aerodromes and prefabricated buildings, stately homes, ordinary houses, you name it, we get called there. Hospitals, schools, every sort of building really we get called in. We're not psychic investigators or ghostbusters. We're answering in a Samaritan type way people who are very distressed, who want help. and want relief from what's happening to them. And so we're responding to a request for help.
If you'd have seen Nathan's face when he saw these ghosts, you'd understand that it was no way in the world was he, you know, joking. And I don't think people realise, you know, the distress that, you know, Nathan went through.
In November 1995, Reverend Willis received a panicked call from Catherine Bridge after she was awakened by the terrifying screams of her 6-year-old son, Nathan. It was the last straw for Catherine, who had already felt an evil presence, but had, until then, kept it to herself.
And he was just hysterical, screaming, "No, go away, no, go away." And we brought him downstairs into the living room, and he was really crying, he was sobbing. And he just said that there was somebody in his bedroom. And I said to him, "No, Nathan, nobody can get in, the door's locked, you know." But there was no way I could convince him. And all of a sudden he started screaming. And like me and my mum was sort of like looking around as if to say, "Well, you know, what's going on?" And he said, he's there, he's coming, call the police.
When you're having a dream, you can't talk, can you? You can only open your mouth, can't you? Without coming out of it. So it wasn't a dream, was it?
I wanted to see Nathan myself and think, well, is this just a child getting disturbed and having nightmares, or is it really happening? I went to the house and talked to them, and there seemed to be, you know, their mother and sister also, the mother and sister also seemed to have had experiences in the house, and it seemed to me to be objective.
When Tom arrived, he explained to Nathan that he was just going to go through each of the rooms and just say a prayer. You know, I mean, he put like a cross of holy water above Nathan's bed and explained that, you know, this will make them go away. I think Tom put Nathan's mind at ease a lot, you know, through just actually going round with him.
He blessed the wall and he blessed right up, and he had to come in bed on my bed.
According to Church of England Archdeacon Hugh Buckingham, exorcism has been an accepted and practiced religious rite for centuries.
It is quite usual for each diocese in the Church of England to have at least one person who oversees the paranormal and does exorcisms and that kind of thing. The fact is that an awful lot of people have experiences of this nature.
Because for 200 or 300 years the church has not met a lot of need for this ministry, the colleges have not been geared up to teaching the clergy how to deal with the phenomena. But now, because more and more clergy are meeting complaints and requests for dealing with this kind of phenomena, the colleges are beginning to get organised and get some training.
Over the years, the vicar has found that his most disturbing cases have come from people who experimented with the occult, stirring up unexpected evil energies.
There always have been hauntings down the centuries, but we haven't had the amount of dabbling in the occult that we've had in recent years. There's been traditional teaching of the Christian faith and the Jewish faith and the Muslim faith that people should not dabble, because if you start dabbling, you begin to pull in all sorts of strange intelligences and phenomena.
Reverend Willis feels that it is his duty to administer to the spiritual needs of his flock, no matter how unearthly their request.
It's part, really, of the healing ministry of the church. In the same way as we lay hands for the healing of someone and asking God to remove the illness, so you're asking God to remove evil.
The Bridge case is another success story for the vicar, and little Nathan is once again having sweet dreams in his own bed.
At least if anything does happen again, at least we know we've got the phone number and we know that, you know, he's going to take us seriously and he will come down.
After 30 years with a decidedly unconventional specialty, Reverend Willis finds that kind of appreciation is the best reward.
My wife is a psychologist, and she asked me her in question the other day and said, describe your life in one sentence. And I thought, good grief, how could you answer a question like that? And suddenly the words came. I was surprised. I've seen the glory and been part of it.
After 30 years, Reverend Willis is finally hanging up his paranormal hat. But before he does, England's premier exorcist has scheduled a series of seminars to teach young priests the knowledge and lessons that he's learned over the past 3 decades.
Next.
3, 2, 1, mark.
Can this machine artificially induce out-of-body experiences? Later, driving out of voyeur ghosts.
For many years, the military has conducted studies on just how much G-force pilots and astronauts can withstand during flight. Recently, a study was conducted to determine just what happens before G-lock, the moment a pilot loses consciousness. During these G-lock experiments, pilots reported visions and feelings that mimic what parapsychologists call the out-of-body experience.
I was totally conscious. That's what was so startling, is that I was fully conscious. It was not a dream. It was not some type of hallucination.
In 1972, William Buhlman took a long trip without ever leaving his house. He wasn't using drugs or alcohol. He was having an out-of-body experience.
I sat up and literally stepped away from my physical body. And at that point, what was really shocking is that I looked down, and it struck me that that was my physical body. But I was totally real. I could consciously think.
Since then, Buhlman has taken hundreds of such trips and now teaches others how to induce the out-of-body experience. He uses a meditative technique that begins with visualization of a specific place.
No one knows why it works, but it's been used for centuries. That if you focus enough, your consciousness has a tendency to go to the location that you've concentrated upon. Anyone can learn how to have an out-of-body experience. Every religion in the world has a central theme that we are a non-physical being, and at death we exit our physical body. If that's true, then why can't we do the same right now?
New Age hocus pocus? Just another fad, courtesy of a crazy bunch of Californians? The United States Navy doesn't think so.
Okay, we're all set out here, Lieutenant.
Let's rock and roll.
All right. Subject is Lieutenant Schmarro.
Okay, on my mark. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, mark.
This is no joyride for Lieutenant Schmarro. He is strapped inside a dynamic flight simulator, a spherical gondola perched at the end of a 50-foot centrifuge. It duplicates the extreme forces of gravity that pilots must endure inside high-altitude jet fighters. Scientists at the Naval Air Warfare Center in Warminster, Pennsylvania, are studying the potentially life-threatening effects of a condition called G-lock, gravity-induced loss of consciousness.
In fighter aviation medicine, loss of consciousness is not just a symptom, it's a problem, because at the speeds that we're going, you can imagine within seconds you can impact the ground.
During the earliest experiments in the 1970s, Dr. Winnery was chief scientist at Warminster. He became fascinated with the strange, unexpected side effect of G-lock.
We decided to try to understand what the neurophysiology of unconsciousness was, which was truly something that was really new.
And what they got was an out-of-body experience.
During the loss of consciousness episode, sensory input is deprived, the ability for the brain to output to the body is deprived, and so, in essence, the nervous system or the brain interprets that as being separated from its body. Being separated from a body may be interpreted as an out-of-body experience.
Some of the G-lock experiences that I had were very memorable.
Aerospace engineer Rob McConnell has taken more than 40 test rides in the flight simulator.
I grew up in New Jersey, and I had this feeling of being at the Jersey Shore on a warm summer evening at an amusement park. And it was dark, but there were these lights flashing around, and I could hear a calliope in the background and see a Ferris wheel and smell of cotton candy. It was as if I was there. Except for reality itself, I don't remember anything being quite that real.
A fully conscious out-of-body experience is as real as us talking now. It's that dramatic.
Lieutenant Dylan Schmarro is a Navy research psychologist who experienced all the sights and sounds of a real disco on this ride in the simulator.
I very much felt that I was in an incredibly large warehouse-type setting that was completely dark with many colorful lights, in addition to the strobe lights going on and off. I was mingling, dancing, I can still now remember just the sounds, the echoing, the reverberations, the feeling. I still remember, I could feel the sweat on my body. I could feel I felt like I had a drink in my hand. I could feel the coldness of the drink. I completely felt as if I was truly and utterly there.
We can certainly simulate out-of-body experiences, but we don't have all the answers yet. A lot of people look at there being a mind-body duality that exists. There's really not a separation. That mind is something that is an extension of the physical body that we're just not able to describe at the present time.
Buhlman suggests an alternative theory. He believes that consciousness may not depend on the physical body.
What if consciousness is a separate entity, independent of the biological body? That would explain a lot. There is no proof, by the way, that the biological brain, a 3-pound hunk of gray matter, is the source of consciousness. It is all assumption at this point.
He sees these experiments as an important first step.
I believe the most effective way to discover these answers are through self-initiated and controlled out-of-body experiences. Think of it, why can't scientists be taught to have fully conscious out-of-body experiences and begin to consciously explore the substructure of our physical universe? It's an exciting prospect.
The ability to recreate the out-of-body experience in a laboratory helps broaden our understanding of the phenomenon. But figuring out how to duplicate an O.B.E. only proves that an O.B.E. can be duplicated, not why it occurs outside the laboratory.
Next, did a 19th century spiritualist open the door to this modern-day haunting?
I could still feel like something was next to me and was giving me the creeps.
Recently, Sightings explored the effectiveness of an ancient Chinese method for ridding one Northern California home of ghosts, a cleansing ritual based on the spiritual principle of feng shui. Well, now, a group in Wisconsin is using another ancient method a little closer to home, a centuries-old Native American ritual for dispelling evil spirits. Sightings was contacted by Jeff Seelman of Vanguard Psychic Investigations about his company's unique approach to ghost busting. He offered to show us his methods during his work inside a Milwaukee area home. The 3 women who share the home are being terrorized by what they feel is a malicious spirit.
I'd be sitting in the living room and we'd hear kind of a creaky down the stairs. You'd actually hear it progressing down the stairs, almost as if someone was walking up and down the stairs.
The presence has a strange voyeuristic quality. Windows are found open after they've been closed, doors wide open after they've been locked. Each roommate has had the feeling of being watched in her most private moments, and Kathy believes she was confronted by the entity in her own bed.
When I felt the presence come into the bed with me, it felt like the covers had lifted off my body. And I kept turning around thinking maybe it was just my imagination. I fluffed the covers out, but I could still feel like something was next to me and was giving me the creeps.
Kathy didn't want to sleep in her room, and she didn't want to sleep on the couch, and she didn't want to sleep in my bedroom. So she was going to leave, and I was not going to stay here by myself, so it was, I was going to leave with her.
They have moved out until the house can be cleared of its invasive energy. To rule out an earthly explanation for the phenomenon, Sightings asked 2 local researchers to survey the site and monitor environmental conditions in the home.
This camera is of the type that is made to see in extreme low light level conditions. If there is any type of movement or disturbance to the normal temperatures in the room, the infrared lighting should highlight it and make it recordable for us.
The 24-hour surveillance yielded no evidence of a physical disturbance, so the investigation turned to the metaphysical. Together, Jeffrey Seelman and Mary Ellen Pride have more than 25 years' experience investigating haunted activity. They employ a mix of psychic contact and spiritual cleansing to rid Midwestern homes of disturbing energies and entities. Seelman believes he knows who is haunting this house.
I think it's a very powerful spirit, very evil, negative, obnoxious, parasitical, a feeder that feeds off of energy from others, in this case, the 3 women who live here.
Unknown to Vanguard investigations, members of the Sightings team had independently researched the history of the area. In 1844, John Wagner bought 170 acres of land in Waukesha, Wisconsin, including the land where the house in our investigation sits today. Wagner was a wealthy entrepreneur who had dabbled in mysticism, conducting seances to entertain his friends. Did John Wagner unwittingly open up a dark pathway from the other side that has never been closed? When Jeff enters the empty house, he instantly feels that he is not alone.
My feeling is this particular stairway is well traversed by the spirit. In here, it watches one or more of the women take a shower or a bath. Has some voyeuristic tendencies.
Both investigators feel the presence in every room upstairs. But in Kathy's room, Mary Ellen believes that she has made physical contact.
I felt something thump me real hard, and this area kind of corresponds.
There's a lot of trapped energy in this room.
And there's a lot of agitation, too. So I can feel that because my heart rate is going.
Jeff and Mary Ellen agree that there is a single entity here, definitely male, and potentially more violent than he has shown himself to be. Jeff and Mary Ellen psychically search for the vortex of his energy, the place they term the nest.
The nest is in the basement, and I think Mary is very close to it.
Could predate the time that the house was built, actually, is what my thought would be.
Could be.
This is a pretty intense energy, and it's pretty much directed at women as opposed to men.
Once the nest is identified, Jeff begins to perform a ritual of his own design that he believes has greater power and effectiveness than exorcism. In Kathy's bedroom, he uses symbolic gestures drawn from many faiths to force the entity from this location, replacing its negativity with healing energy. Then, in the basement, at the supposed source of the haunting, Jeff performs a final ritual to drive the dark force out completely and close the spirit portal, ensuring the entity will not return.
I cleanse the atmosphere of all of the house. A lot of perverted energy. I think if the problem would have continued for a while longer, that some really bad things would have probably happened here, far worse than have already happened.
After the ritual cleansing, the three women who had lived in the home agree to return for a visit. There is trepidation, but all three feel that the house has a new, benevolent energy.
There's no way of predicting what could happen, and they said it would have been worse, and I have no desire for that to happen. I'm just relieved because whatever it was is gone.
Since our investigation, Kathy, Erica, and Jen have moved back into their rented home. So far, the haunting activity that drove them from the site has not returned.
Sightings is now on the internet as part of the Sci-Fi Channel's Dominion website. By typing sci-fi.com, users can access information about the entire global Sci-Fi Channel lineup, as well as downloads from dozens of sci-fi movies and series, interviews with noted celebrities, games, and links to the hottest paranormal websites.
We now are able to reach a worldwide audience of Sightings fans, which enables them to give us feedback on what we're producing and how we're showing stories to people. We have features from some of our stories on a weekly basis. We have downloadable images and QuickTime clips.
When I make contact with this entity, I will become a little confrontational. Hello? Hello?
Since its inception, Dominion has become the home of all things science fiction on the World Wide Web. Now, with the addition of Sightings Online, the hope is that it will become a clearinghouse for all things paranormal as well.
Already on the Dominion site, they have access to all the major paranormal links on the internet. We're hoping to reach a worldwide audience and provide state-of-the-art information and news about the paranormal world.
If you've had a paranormal experience, contact Sightings on the World Wide Web at sci-fi.com/sightings. Sightings can also be contacted at America Online at keyword Sightings. or write to us, care of Paramount Television.
Until next time, remember, no mystery is closed to an open mind. For Sightings, I'm Tim White.
Ruwa is a small agricultural community in Zimbabwe's bush country, now the focus of UFO research, because sightings are definitely on the rise in this part of Africa.
The sightings have increased. It has now come to the stage that I do not think a day goes by without some sighting.
I'd say at least half of the sightings that we have are genuine, and the balance would be attributed to things like meteorites, natural phenomenon, that sort of thing. But at least half the sightings reports that we get are definitely genuine.
This string of UFO activity began with a group encounter that occurred in this field next to the Ariel Primary School in Ruwa. In September of 1994, 62 school children claimed that a UFO had landed and that they saw alien beings emerge from the spacecraft.
All I saw was a silver flash, just like that. And I saw a few I saw the bigger one and a spaceship, like 4 or 5 of them, like crowding around it. They were very still, and then I saw them also disappear. They went about a meter off the ground and then they just vanished. We ran down to the teachers and we went into the office and we started telling the teachers, and then they said maybe there's nothing.
But the children started drawing pictures, creating in pencil and crayon a disturbing portrait of extraterrestrial contact.
Definitely not a human. He had a big head and big black eyes and was dressed in a black bodysuit. And his eyes were down here and he was like looking really, really funny.
And these eyes, the children tell us, conveyed a telepathic message, a frightening warning about Earth's destruction.
I think.
And because there have been hundreds of additional sightings since then throughout South Central Africa, more people are trusting in the children.
But the children can't lie. They tell the truth.
PEER, the Program for Extraordinary Experience Research, an organization founded by Dr. John Mack, is continuing to work in Southern Africa. Currently, PEER is producing an in-depth documentary on the Ruwa sightings.
Next, the mystery of healing hands. Later,
when it looked like it split apart, it actually went up an hour.
Strange phenomena in the skies above Idaho.
Psychic healing has a bad name in this country. Most people associating it with psychic surgery, the carnival sideshow version of holistic medicine. But at a recent medical conference sponsored by Harvard University, some forms of psychic healing were praised by mainstream medical practitioners, validating the belief that the mind-body connection plays an essential role in curing illness.
I think there's any question that some people seem to have a natural talent or ability to heal others.
Dr. C. Norman Shealy is a Harvard-trained physician and medical researcher who has spent the last 25 years investigating the claims of alternative healers. He is now among a growing number of medical professionals who recognize the value that so-called spiritual healers can have in modern healthcare.
The definition of a healer is really difficult to come by. And most healers will tell you that they don't heal. They are
making lots of noise, and none of the adults ventured out to see why there's such a noise taking place.
We were all actually in the middle of a staff meeting in the staff room. So there was no teacher actually outside at that point in time.
You must have been discussing some very important topics at the meeting there they were having. So that's kind of, I think, what struck me.
I still don't understand how you could get 62 kids to come up with the exact same story.
I think kids knew about flying saucers. The way they drew the flying saucer and the so-called people who came out of it. Now, those are pictures you'll find in TV programs, in movies.
Well, a lot of these children don't go to the movies. They live in the country. Parents are farmers.
I believe them because normally children don't lie about things like that.
And we always joke with the children, always say all these little green men come out and they say, no, Mommy, but we did see.
But I am sure that they personally are convinced that they saw something and it was something not part of nature.
Well, I mean, kind of, I'm one of those people who like to see with my own eyes, okay?
So essentially, there's nothing that you could hear from the children that would convince you.
I mean, I have to admit, I have all these stories of flying saucers for the last 40 years, and I can't understand their goals while they're here. I don't know what they're doing. They're wasting their time. They're going around in circles, talking to a few people who are insignificant.
But Hein does not view the children or the events that they claim to have witnessed as insignificant. Her proof is a question that haunts everyone who has investigated the Ruwa sightings.
Why would 62 children lie?
On this edition of Sightings, in 1994, these school children saw a UFO land. 2 years later, the alien visitors keep coming.
Why would 62 children lie?
Now their neighborhood is becoming a UFO hotspot.
Because you got a lot of heat. Yeah. You feel it now? Oh, strongly.
Then, their hands have caused the lame to walk and the blind to see. Who are these healers among us?
Through negligence, through weakness.
Later, he's a country minister, and he's also England's premier exorcist.
There always have been hauntings down the centuries.
Also, the Air Force uses this machine to train pilots. Those who use it say it creates out-of-body experiences.
Except for reality itself, I don't remember anything being quite that real.
And can anything be done to the perverse spirit that's terrorizing these three women?
Welcome to Sightings. I'm Tim White. After our recent report on a UFO encounter and group contact in Ruwa, Zimbabwe, many Sightings viewers wrote in requesting additional information about this historic incident. And as Carla Wold tells us in this extended report, the Ruwa encounter was only the first in a series of ongoing UFO sightings. Ruwa, it seems, is Earth's newest paranormal hotspot.
They're trying to tell us something which is going to happen, and other people don't actually believe us sometimes. So maybe they are trying to show us something.
I'd like to welcome Cynthia Hein from Africa. Thank you very much.
No one knows the story of the Ruwa group sighting better than researcher Cynthia Hein. At a recent International UFO Congress in England, Hein held ufologists spellbound with the stories of the Ruwa schoolchildren.
I believe them. I believe they saw what they said they saw, small details that I saw in the drawings, which were incredible.
Hein is a respected African journalist who covered the Ruwa encounter for the BBC. What she finds most convincing about the story is the fact that not one of the 62 children has changed his or her version of what happened since the event first occurred in 1994. This despite the community's strict punishment for lying.
Well, I'll tell you one thing. They're afraid of the headmaster. There's no doubt about it at all. He's one of the people that still cane children if they're naughty. Says he believes in discipline. And he said, I'm not a believer, but he said, I can tell you one thing, children would never lie to me.
But not everyone who studied the Ruwa group sighting believes the children's story.
It's not a question of whether they're lying or not, okay? It's a question of their distinction between reality and not reality may not be as sharp as that of an older kid or an adult person.
Professor John Saliba teaches comparative religion and has researched many claims of extraterrestrial contact, discounting them all.
Another thing which kind of struck me is, here are these craft coming down, presumably